Good morning and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Koran of the Muslims. Yes, we'll be back once again breaking this thing down verse by verse into factual logical statements in English so that we can understand who or what is Allah Akbar, what does he mean by the contents of his book, and more importantly for us as non-believers, how does this affect us in our lives today? So before we get started, as I always do, I'm going to remind you, if you have any doubts as to my factual accuracy or the things I'm about to say, please first buy, translate and read one of these, an Arabic-only Quran, because this is the word of Allah, he only speaks in Arabic. Any other translation or interpretive work by Allah's command is to be considered the work of Satan and should not be believed. So therefore, if you wish to fact check me, this is the one you go to. Once you've done so, you'll recognise every word I'm about to say to you now is 100% true of the words of Allah and what Muslims believe today. So, if you've been keeping up with the series, and we're quite far into the book now, we're at AL-NIISA, verse 58. AL-NIISA being the book of women, which you'd think was something to do with women, but it's actually Allah's instructions to the men how to teach the women how they should live their lives and how they should behave, and more prominently how you should punish them if they do not do exactly what they are told at all times. So with that in mind, let's carry on where we left off with verse 58. 58. Surely Allah commands you to give the trusts back to the people, and when you are judging people yourself, judge them only with justice. Allah preaches grace by it to you, and he hears and sees all things. End of verse. So, unusually for Allah, this sounds kind of nicey-nicey, doesn't it? I almost feel like this is the nicest thing Allah has previously, up to this point, said. But we have to keep in mind, he is talking to his men and saying, this is what you say to your wives and your daughters. This is how you instruct your women in the ways of Allah, so that they surrender to you in obedience and they do exactly what you want them to do. So that's the reason why it has a kind of frilly niceness to it. This isn't actually what Muslims are doing. This is what Muslims are telling the women to do for them. And mostly the women are sex slaves or mothers. That's the only two roles they have. They're not allowed to work unless they're working in the sex trade as slaves or they are working at home as one of the many wives of the Muslim men. So with that in mind, let's break it down. Surely Allah commands you to give the trusts back to the people. And when you are judging people yourself, judge them with justice. So what he means here, surely Allah commands you to give the trusts back to the people. What that means is the people in this instance are children that you're looking after, and they're trusting you with their upbringing and their care because you're the only one that's there and you're their mother or you're looking after them. So the same as they're trusting you to look after them and be good, you have to be nice to them. And when you're judging between them, when they're lying and they're trying to blame, what kids are like, when they're blaming each other for the various trouble that they'll cause each other, you have to judge between them with justice. And you think, oh, that's nice, justice is good, but what you got to keep in mind, Allah specifically defines what Allah's justice is, and it isn't the same as what you might think. Our justice over here is based on Christian morality, fairness, and honesty. It is not an eye for an eye, it is forgiveness, which is not what Allah preaches at all. Allah preaches an eye for an eye. So that's why you're having to be told here, as a mother, judge fairly. If one kid punches another kid, don't tell that kid, oh, don't do it again. Get the kid to punch the other kid back, and then they'll both learn. That's what this is saying. And we can reference this through other books, which Allah has sneakily placed right at the back of the Quran. So knowing that the women aren't allowed to read the Quran on their own, they have to have a man read it to them. And they're very unlikely to get to that last page. The last book in the whole Quran is the one that describes the justice. But wouldn't you just know it? I've read that one first before I started the reading and the making of these videos. So I can tell you, Allah's justice is not at all what we would consider to be justice. And when he is instructing his women how to look after the wee ones, the little kids, and he says something like judge them with justice, this isn't actually as good as it sounds. What this means is you judge them by the Quran. You don't actually judge them by justice, and you, as the mother, don't get to make any decisions for them. They're above you, even though they're children and they're men. They're little boys in your care. Because they're male, because they're Muslim men, they're above you, really. Even though you have dominion over them as the mother, you only have the dominion over them if you're following the Koran. That's what this means. Judge them by justice means you as the mother have no say in their affairs. You have to judge them by Allah's book only. Then he carries on. Allah preaches grace by it to you. By it means the Quran. So Allah preaches the grace of the Quran of the Muslims by it to you to give to the children. Do you understand? You're keeping up with me here. I know it's getting a little bit complicated, but what Allah is saying, O ye woman Muslim, is judge the children by this, not what you think or what you think's best for them or what you've heard. Otherwise, you're not treating them fairly, and you shall not be treated fairly yourself. So what he's actually saying between the lines here, if you don't teach the kids correctly by Allah's Quran, your husband will beat you and punish you. Even though it's not expressly said here, in the previous verses we know that's what it means. And then the last thing he says is, Allah hears and sees all things. I'm watching you, is what Allah is saying to the women here. Don't think you can get away with it just because there's no men around, because the kids are going to snitch on you to the man, and the man's going to beat you and admonish you and possibly starve and rape you, because that's the other punishments you will get if you don't worship enough, if you're not teaching the kids to worship enough by it, which is Allah's Quran. That's what this means. And we move on. 59. O ye believers, obey only Allah and His Prophet, and the men who we appointed to take charge of your affairs. If you so have any disputes past this, bring it to Allah and His Prophet if you did indeed believe in Him and His day of judging. End of verse. So if we break this down, O ye believers, remember this is the Muslim man telling the woman how to bring up the kids. So the Muslim man says to the woman, when they're arguing, this is what you say to them, woman. You quote the Quran, because that's what this is. This is a previous quote. O ye believers, obey only Allah and His Prophet, and the men we have appointed to take charge of your affairs. So don't obey me as the mother. Obey your father, obey Allah, and obey the men we appointed, i.e. the imams. So we're saying twice in 2 verses, when the children are arguing or have disputes, ignore the mother, follow Allah, follow your father, follow the imams, who are all following Allah. So everyone has to do what the Quran tells them to do. That's what this means. Then he goes on, if you have so any disputes past this, bring it to Allah and His Prophet if you did indeed believe in Him and His day of judging. So if you can't solve everything immediately by reading bits of Quran to the children, if they still give you trouble after that, because remember, as the mother, you're not allowed to actually make a judgment for them, even though that's kind of how it sounds. You're only allowed to make the judgments that Allah has made. You're only allowed to read them this book, is what that means. So if that doesn't resolve things, tell them to bring it to Allah. That's literally like when your children are arguing and you can't solve it by talking about the Quran, you say, shut up now, bring it to Allah at the end day. So just shut up and swallow it, effectively, and then wait until the final day. And by the way, we know the end day of judgment is when Allah has His Muslims kill all the infidels, non-believers, Christians, Jews, atheists, agnostics, Buddhists, apostates, everyone else. When they're all dead, that's the day of justice. Then you can bring your disputes to Him, O Muslim children and wife. That's what this means. 60. Have you not seen those who claim to believe in Allah, but instead desire to be seen in idolatry? Indeed, they have been led far away astray by Satan to become as infidels by these actions. End of verse. You gotta love Allah's creative writing, haven't you? So if we break this down, have you not seen those who claimed to believe in Allah, but instead desire to be seen in their idolatry? So remember, this is the man telling the woman how to bring up the kids. What this means is, anyone who doesn't believe in Allah, who you come across, even people who claim to be Muslims but aren't doing this, they're not worshipping enough, they're not doing enough of Allah's commands, or they're not doing Allah's commands sufficiently accurately, it's because they wish to be seen as an idol. They want to take credit. They want to be seen as the big important guy, or the big important child, or the big important woman, but probably not woman, because she'll be beaten and admonished. And that's idolatry. They want to take Allah's credit away from them. They're idol worshippers. So when you see them, indeed they have been led far away astray by Satan. Oh, they must have been reading his English translation Quran then, because as we know, in the word of Allah, the English translation and any other interpretive work that is not this one is the work of Satan. So that's what's happening there. When they claim they're doing the Quran but they're not doing it properly, it's because the Jews have got to them, or Satan has got to them, or they've been reading the English Quran, which is wrong. So don't do that, or you will become as infidels by doing that. Off with your head, you're dead is what will happen to you, because we know infidels get killed and then burned forever in the fires of hell. Or if they were previously Muslims, first of all, they are grave tortured, as in Allah hangs around on top of their dead body zombie in the grave and tortures them for an indeterminate period of time. Then they go to hell to burn forever. So that will happen to you, Muslim children, says the mother, if you don't follow this and worship only Allah and do exactly what he tells you. That's what this means. 61. When they hear, read what Allah and Muhammad did send down to you, these hypocrites did continually turn their heads away from you. So this is admonishment, if we break it down. This is the mother telling off the children again, because they're being naughty. They're not listening to Allah. They're not listening to the Quran verses that the mother is telling them, because they're little kids, you know. They just want to play. They just want to have fun, but they're not allowed to have fun. They have to learn how to be a good Muslim man by following this now. If they don't, punish them. But don't beat them or punish them too hard, because you're a woman, you're not allowed to. So you read them the Quran. If they don't do it, you tell them to bring it to Allah, which means Dad will get them later in the day. And when they hear, read what Allah and Muhammad did send down to you from the mother. So when the mother's saying, look, just do what you're told. Allah's told you to do it. If you don't do what you're told, you're not obeying Allah. These hypocrites did continually turn their heads away from you. So now we're talking to the mum. We're saying if your child repeatedly doesn't do what he's told by Allah in the book, it's because he's a hypocrite and he'll continually turn his head away from you. And as we know, a hypocrite is one of the worst things you can do. So at this stage, the mum is going to pull out this and beat the child with it, literally. And hopefully that will fix the child's behaviour. But if it doesn't, we go to line 62. How so then when misfortune reaches you, i.e. the misfortune of your mum beating you with the Quran because you haven't been following Allah's words and you're now a hypocrite, how so then when misfortune reaches you, by other things in your hands, i.e. child, stop going on about the stuff you've learned, stop talking about things you've seen in the world, stop being knowledgeable and educating yourself through experience. That means nothing. Allah is the way you educate yourself. Listen to Allah, follow Allah's Quran and stop being a hypocrite, or you're going to get beat with a Quran. And if that still doesn't work, and you claim, this is the child claiming this, after you've beat them on the head, the child goes, oh, we desire only for good, oh, we only want to reconcile with you, mum. And they swear by Allah. Once they have stopped being naughty and they swear by Allah and they start behaving, then you can be nice to them. And we move to 63. Allah knows what is truly in their hearts. Turn away from them. Preach to them flawless words about themselves. So now that they've gone back to surrender and they are doing exactly what Allah has told them, now you can be nice to them, O Muslim mother. Preach flawless words to them about themselves. Say, you're great, you're fantastic, you're a great Muslim. You really are great. Which is kind of nice, because you want to be nice to your children. But remember, you're being nice to your children because they've agreed to kill the Jews and do all the horrible stuff that's in here. So this is the indoctrination and the brainwashing of the Muslim children, via the mum, via the dad, via Allah and the imams. They're all invested in brainwashing the children. And the reason is, the Holy Jihad needs soldiers, and these children are those soldiers. They just need to get tall enough to hold guns, swords, and attach dynamite to themselves and remote triggers, and then we can send them out in the arms of the Jihad, in Allah's cause. That's what this is really getting towards. So that's what this means. From 60 to 63, it's all about punish the child, beat them with the Quran, preach them Quran, tell them they have to follow Allah. If they don't, they're going to go to judgment and be an infidel and burn forever. So that's what you do. And when they finally surrender, only then can you be nice to them and say, oh, good boy, Jimmy Mohammed. That's what this means. So we move on to 64. And remember, we sent no other prophets but by Allah's permission. When they did harm themselves by injustice, then they came to you, and they begged forgiveness in Allah and His messengers. They will find Allah relentful and merciful, if only they believe it. End of verse. This is the nicest, this is definitely the nicest thing Allah has said so far. So even though we're indoctrinating and brainwashing these poor innocent children into hating everybody on earth and wanting to go and kill the infidels, and join the holy jihad, at least he's not beating them and threatening to kill them and threatening to rape them like he did with the women, or just straight up sending them to their deaths and telling them that their reward's going to be 72 virgins like he has with the men. He's actually considering that children are not going to respond well to that kind of thing. So after he's beat them with after the mother has beat them with the Quran and they've accepted surrender to Islam, then you're going to be nice to them. And then you're saying, by the way, we have sent no other prophets but by Allah's permission. So the reason the child is being told this is because they're going to come into contact with the evil Jews and Christians, the apostates, agnostics, Buddhists, everyone else. And they're all going to have their own prophets. And the kid's going to be like, oh yeah, prophets are good. What about your prophets? Tell me about your prophets. You don't want to be doing that. We sent no other prophets but the ones by Allah's permission. That's the only ones you're allowed to listen to. And when you harmed yourselves by injustice, and then you went to your mother, that's what that's talking about. When they did harm themselves by injustice, i.e. they were naughty, and then they went to the mother, and they begged forgiveness in Allah, like they didn't want your forgiveness, mother, you're not even important, you're only there to look after them because there's no available men, and the men are off fighting the jihad. So when they come to you, and they beg forgiveness in Allah and His messengers so that you can stop whacking them on the head with the Quran, they will find Allah relenting and merciful if only they believe this. That's what this means. They have to believe this. Otherwise, they're going to continually get punished until they surrender. When they surrender, it's all good. Says the mother, says the father to the mother, says Allah to the father. So it's a line of succession in the slavery of Allah. Allah, Imam, father, mother, child. And then we move on to the last verse. 65. They will not believe until you judge between them by this in what they dispute. Then they may not find shame on themselves in your judgments, and they will surrender fully in total submission. End of verse, end of reading. So we finally get to a long-winded child's development. This is child development in the Quran. We finally get to the last bit, and it says, they will not believe until you judge between them in this, in what they dispute. So that's saying children are not going to believe this. Obviously, they're going to want proof, but you don't have any proof to give them. So beat them with the Quran. Preach the Quran. Tell them that they're not going to have any shame if they follow the Quran. And the between the lines bit is they are going to have a lot of shame if they don't follow the Quran. Then, after they've done all that, they will find themselves not shameful in their judgments, which you're giving them from the Quran. So the Quran's then going to like them. Allah's going to love them. And they will be surrendering in full, total submission to Allah. They will be worshipping enough, finally. And the children can stop being punished and they can go back to their Quran studies and learning how to kill the infidels. That's what this means. So that's the end of the reading. And, 20 minutes is long enough for this video, but I feel like we need to encapsulate this with a quick summary. So that's what we're going to do now. We start off by saying Allah commands the mother to give the trust back to the children. So the children are almost on an equal footing with the mother. She doesn't really have any say or command over them. And the reason this is because Allah's preaching His grace by this. So really, the mother's job as the caretaker is not to be a mother to these children. It's to be a stand-in preacher. The mother has to have this there, otherwise she can't mother. That's what this is saying. O ye believers, obey only Allah and His Prophet and the men we appointed. So it's even saying in the second line, mother, you have no say in this. Allah, His prophets, and the men we appointed. They're the ones who take charge of the situation. You don't know anything, mother. You have to just read this. This is where the knowledge is. This is where the mothering child development goodness is in this book here, the Quran of the Muslims. So you're being a bad mother if you say anything outside of here, and your husband will punish you, beat you, and starve you, and possibly rape and kill you when you are back with him when he gets home. Unless you do this. That's what this is saying. So I'm flavour texting it here to make it more interesting so you remember it. And no doubt Muslims will go, you're interpreting it wrong, the English one's right. No, remember Allah in His word in Arabic says the English one is the work of Satan. So shut your mouth, oh infidel Muslims, you are mistaken. Allah is the one I'm listening to when we're talking about Allah's commands, not you. And by the way, you should learn this. If you're a real Muslim faithful, this is the one you want to be learning, not the work of Satan, which is the English one. And then we get to the final bit, which is a repetition of we sent no other prophets but by Allah's permission, and anyone who doesn't do what they're told by the Quran is harming themselves. But if they're children and they come to you and they submit to Islam and they surrender to Allah's will, then they will find no shame and they will develop into a correct jihadi. And the final bit is, even so, they probably won't believe in Allah because they're children until you admonish them and you read them Quran, but they will find shame until they surrender to Islam. So what we're finding out here, the main tools of child development by Allah's Quranic morality and child development is violence, shaming, and threats. And the positive bit we're using is, you can one day be a jihadi that kills lots of infidels and you'll be a really powerful preacher or warrior in the eyes of Allah. Then you'll go and get your 72 virgins. So think about it. At a very young age, Muslim boys are being sexualized into this thought that 72 virgins is the thing they want when they grow up. How they're going to get it is by killing and punishing infidels because Allah has told them to. And they're learning the morality of solving disputes and using justice. That's what they're defining this as, Allah's justice. Allah's justice is this. And if you're a kid and you're just told the infidels are bad, we're going to have to kill them when we're older, and this is justice, when you are growing up, this goes into your head and indoctrinates you to think everyone who doesn't have this is bad and should be punished by you because you're righteous and good. Allah's going to reward you for doing this with sex, which is amazing if you're a child. A little boy is going to think, wow, 72 virgins. The mother actually isn't all that important, is what you're learning. She's just there to watch you and to give you food. She's almost like a servant of yours. And the final thing is, all these judgments are coming from Allah. Allah's the one you want to surrender to, not your dad, not your mum, not anyone else, not even the imams or the people we appointed. The Prophet Muhammad and Allah, that's who you want to serve, not anyone else. And this is backed up in the back of the book when they're talking about justice, because justice is defined by Allah as something that comes out of the Quran and is in opposition to parents, husbands, friends, employers, or anyone else. It specifically says in the end of the book, justice from these people is false. And it specifically says, if your parents don't agree with this, you have every right to disagree with them, to the stage where you can actually beat it into them if you're a man. And so we learn that Allah's child development is brainwashing the child into early violence, early sexualization, not having respect for the mother, and being prepared for the holy jihad, killing the infidels, getting your virgins at the end of your dreadfully warlike and non-peaceful life. Which I think is pretty disgusting, but it's nothing new. This is exactly what we would expect from Allah, knowing what we know. So that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. We'll be back at 4:15 later in the day for more. Until then, have a lovely day. God bless you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now. And if you thought that was bad, just you wait until the next episode of Without Lies, Islam Dies at 4:15 this afternoon. Until then, I shall bid you a good day. God bless you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now. Bye bye bye.